Many sections stumped me, such as address. Given the country's casual attitudes toward street names, it should have come as no surprise that addresses in Costa Rica were not paragons of exactitude, and that mail delivery offered the same suspense as these scratch-off lottery games. When we'd signed the rental agreement for our house, the address was listed as 300 metros al sur del supermercado La Flor, casa número 2. Was that what I was supposed to put down in the hospital registration form, that we lived in the second house 300 meters south of the dingy corner store that passed for a supermarket? The registering clerk pointed out a section on the form that required my numero. I pulled out my health insurance card, but she waved it away. I offered my social security number, but she shook her head. She said what sounded like a citizen's number. I explained that we weren't citizens, but we were visiting for the year. Meanwhile, I was anxious that these forms were taking so long and that my son still had a guanabana seed up his nose. Who knew what sort of toxins were leaching out into his mucous membranes while we were debating about citizen numbers and supermercados? Finally, she asked for my passport number. My passport, of course, was at home, where it was supposed to be, safely tucked away with our plane tickets, and I didn't know the number by heart. The clerk shot me an exasperated look. By that point, I just wanted to grab Noah's hand and march right in. I was on my home turf here. I could break right in and get the situation solved. But I wasn't on my home turf. There was nothing I could do but bottle up my complicated feelings of inadequacy, frustration, anxiety, and impatience, and wait for our forms to be processed. Finally, a nurse called us in. Her rituals of blood pressure and temperature were familiar. We waited in a cubicle until the ER doctor arrived. She gamely spoke to Noah in the little English that she knew, but that comfort soon became irrelevant. When she pushed the long-nosed hemostat clamp up Noah's nose to extract the seed, Noah's screams dominated everything. I squeezed 20 pounds of squirming boy in my arms, trying to hold him still to allow the metal tool higher and higher still. After 5 excruciating attempts, defeat was admitted. We were referred to an ENT specialist in the adjacent building whose office hours thankfully hadn't yet ended. Dr. Guzman Marrero was a genial physician of Bolivian descent. His English was fluent, though formal, and he quickly settled Noah into a comfortable exam chair. While he laid out an array of surgical tools on the metal stand, I kept reminding Noah about the promised ice cream that would surely materialize after this procedure. I hoped Dr. Guzman knew of the nearest vending machine. There will be no need for machines, vending or otherwise, Dr. Guzman said, spraying a quick dose of anesthetic inside Noah's nose. You will find the hospital restaurant rather sufficient. I have full faith that ice cream exists on the menu. He had Noah's attention by this point. There is vanilla, no doubt, the doctor continued. A small retractor widened Noah's nostril. Chocolate? I can offer personal guarantees. He positioned the light. Strawberry is a distinct possibility. He adjusted the mirror. Often there will be mango or guava. A narrow forceps wended its way up. But for sure, Noah winced and squeezed his eyes tight. There are ice cream cones. The guanabana seed slid out onto a waiting gauze pad like a prize from a bubblegum machine. Dr. Guzman wiped the seed dry and handed it to Noah, who eyed it warily, then snatched it and crammed it into his pocket. We thanked the doctor profusely and followed his directions to the hospital restaurant. His predictions were all true, and now we all knew 2 words in Spanish, guanabana and helado. So one of the things at Bellevue that's a real challenge is dealing with patients who speak other languages. And there are many ways we get around this. So for many years, for most of my training, the way was usually the 5-year-old daughter. It was the guy who pushed the gurneys. It was some uncle calling in from his cell phone on the taxi cab, trying to translate. It was the overhead page. Is there anyone who speaks Serbo-Croatian? Please come to pediatrics. That sort of thing. But we've now started to have official interpretation, and now we use a remote simultaneous interpretation, which is a 2-headed telephone set that links to a set of interpreters off-site who do simultaneous translations. So I'd be speaking in English, and as I'm talking, the interpreter's then speaking to the patient in their language. And we have about in-house, we have French, Spanish, Mandarin, Cantonese, Creole, Bengali, and then for anything beyond that, we then contract with a service. So I had a Hungarian patient on Monday, and so I called back 3 times to this Hungarian interpreter to get that. But there are interesting things about translation that you never quite know what to expect. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that our translators, or interpreters as they're called, they translate faithfully language. But many concepts can't really be translated. And I was talking to one interpreter, and he told me some experiences. He was Haitian, that for the Haitian patients, and many West Africans he translates in French, didn't have a concept, he noticed, of an illness that didn't have a visible wound. So when the doctors would talk about cancer, let's say, or heart disease, that didn't have a symptom or a wound, they would translate the words. The patient would nod yes, but it didn't register as a disease. Short of something gaping, bleeding that you could put your hands on, the disease didn't translate. So I often feel as though we need kind of a cultural interpreter to explain these things. I was telling this story this morning in one of the lectures. This interpreter asked me why doctors use the word water pill instead of diuretic. And I said, and the answer is that our diuretic is hydrochlorothiazide. It's a very long word. Most of us can't spell it, much less say it. And diuretic seems too technical. So we all say water pill or pastilla de agua. And he said, well, you know, to most Haitian patients that he speaks with, a water pill seems like a placebo. There's nothing in it. It's interesting. No wonder nobody takes their blood pressure medications. So in the spirit of being education, I said, well, you know, in English, we use the term sugar pill for a placebo. He said, oh, to Haitians, a sugar pill sounds like there's something in it, real food, but a water pill sounds like nothing. As you know, that's such an interesting fact. I never would have known this. And all the time I talk about a water pill, my patients must think, she's giving me nothing, you know, out the window with the medication. He told me a story of a Haitian woman who presented with breast cancer, and he was the interpreter, and was conveying the information about breast cancer. And the patient said, yes, 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 she'd come for treatment, all these things. And then in the end, she didn't show for any of the treatment. And she came back 2 years later. Now, of course, the cancer was widely metastatic and advanced, and the same doctor was still there. And the doctor was crushed. You know, a young resident who, idealistic, caring, compassionate, was crushed that the patient didn't come back. And the patient said, well, it didn't hurt her. She didn't see it. And so she got some salves and some tea, and that was what she was going to do. And she couldn't explain. The patient could not get the concept of cancer. And so the interpreter had to interrupt the doctor and say, to explain that the patient just conceptually didn't have a basis for this disease, and it didn't register at all. And so they ended up spending more than an hour trying to explain the idea of a symptomless disease. And the patient did actually consent to treatment, but it was a little late then. So I want to read one other short excerpt about some language challenges. Je m'appelle, I stuttered to Mr. Mazandes, the serious young man in a gray wool overcoat, standing before me with ramrod posture. Je m'appelle Dr. Ofri. There, I'd gotten it out. The language of Descartes, Voltaire, and Balzac had clearly vacated my cortex. Despite all those years of French classes and one brief visit to Paris, je m'appelle was the best I could come up with. And even that was a struggle. Pushed aside by the overwhelming necessity for Spanish in our clinic, further dilapidated by decades of disuse, my French shriveled until I could not conjure up a single word beyond stating my name. I was appalled at my brain's porosity. Mr. Mazandes smiled politely. No doubt he was accustomed and perhaps resigned to the challenges of communication here in America. I gestured for him to sit and tried to signal a polite just a moment as I started down the list of options. This was before our simultaneous phone interpreters.